Welcome to Two Jews, One Opinion, a podcast where we sit down with Jews of all backgrounds to have real, honest, and productive conversations. We all know the famous saying, two Jews, three opinions. But what if that's just a myth? What if, deep down, we're more alike than we think? Today, Jewish unity feels more urgent than ever. But real unity? It's more than just posturing or outward displays. It's about breaking through misconceptions, tearing down assumptions, and truly understanding one another. I believe as Jews, our connections run far deeper than the differences that seem to divide us. So join me on this journey, where we're shattering the myth of endless opinions and revealing the truth. Two Jews, one opinion. Let's get real, let's get honest, and most importantly, let's get united. Today, I'm excited to welcome John Ghermezian and Adin Zweigbaum, two incredible voices in the Minneapolis Jewish community, here to share their unique perspectives on Jews and work. John Ghermezian serves as President and Chief Business Officer at Mall of America. An innovative thinker, he is dedicated to shaping retail's future. As well, John has a passion for learning and sharing with others the depth and beauty in Jewish living. Adin Zweigbaum, co-founder and former director of media for the Minnesota Varsity League and Wisdom Labs at Wisdom Gaming, has over 5 years of experience in startups and tech. Driven by the belief that necessity drives innovation, Adin is passionate about solving real problems through strategic partnerships, marketing, and product development, helping ventures grow from the ground up. In this episode of Two Jews, One Opinion, we're diving into the Jewish approach to work, how our values and traditions shape the way we approach careers, hustle, and balance. Whether it's the idea of no work on Shabbos or holidays, or the emphasis on ethical business, we'll explore the deep connection between work and purpose in Jewish life. Okay, it's great having both of you guys here. John, how you doing today?
Great. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Adin?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm really excited. Thank you.
It's so nice that you guys came. Okay, so the topic of today's episode is Jews and work. I'll start off, I guess, with a cute little story. There's a perception, reality maybe, that, Haredi Jews in Israel don't work, right? If you're Haredi in Israel, you just don't work. So there was once a government official who was not very happy about this. So he went to one of his friends who happened to be a Haredi Jew in Israel, and he said to him, what's it with you guys? You guys just don't work. What's up with that? So he says, what do you mean? The Vilna Gaon says that this world is 6,000 years long. And he says each one of the 1,000 years of the world is compared to a different day of creation. So the first 1,000 years are Sunday, the second 1,000 years are Monday, et cetera, et cetera. So he says, today, we're on Friday after midday. You're not supposed to work Friday after midday. We're getting ready for Shabbos. We have an interesting relationship with work. Everybody's got you got to do it. Some people love it more than others, but it's necessary. So the reason why I picked this topic for this particular time of year is because everybody knows October doesn't exist in the Jewish calendar. There is no October. You go look at the thing, it's like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. So there's no October in the calendar. Call me after the holidays means November, right? Mm-hmm. And that obviously creates a tremendous challenge. If you're trying to work in the world, you have a job, you have employees, you're running a company. How do you deal with that? So my first question is, how do you deal with literally having working in the corporate world, having an entire month off because you're Jewish? Does that present a problem? John, why don't you start with that?
Yeah, big question. I think the first thing for me is to give, I guess in the role that I play, as long as I can give as much advance notice to my team to help them understand what the upcoming next 6 months are going to look like, so we can work well in advance of not getting stuck, I think really is the first thing. But for me, I really rely on an incredible team. You can't ever think you're going to work in a vacuum. So if I was highly independent, so to speak, and that I felt that I need to do everything on my own and then sort of get into this crisis mode. So thankfully, really do have an incredible team, and so we rely on each other, and I can rely on my team to be able to help and make sure that things don't, they're not too much dependent on me. Those are sort of some of the easy things. I could talk more about this, but I think really the general mindset has to be that they have to see that I take my Judaism seriously in other ways that don't conflict directly with the business, so that it doesn't look like I'm really just using this time for personal pleasure.
Adin, not everybody has a team that they can delegate things to. So what's your experience with Jewish October?
Right, absolutely. I mean, not so long ago, I was in school, and then, so that's less than 3 years ago, right? And at that time, it was actually much easier because all I have to do is just email my teachers and tell them the appropriate amount ahead of time, usually like 2 weeks or something. And then they give you makeup time, they understand it. They're much more understanding in that environment. Then it's actually something I really struggled with once I got into the work world. I would say at first I'd wait too long because, the work world, that's the real world. You're kind of scared to bring that up to people. You're scared to say, hey, I'm not going to be at work this day, and then a week after these 2 days, and then a week after these 2 days, and then one more week after these 2 days. And except for December, the secular world, they don't really have that. And when they're on holiday, everyone's on holiday. So a lot of the time, people can feel that, like you said, it's just a cop-out. It's definitely something that I talked to John about, I want to say 3 years ago or maybe 2 years ago, and he gave me very similar advice to what he just mentioned. Make sure that not only do they know it's not a cop-out, but make sure you know it's not a cop-out. Like, are you just taking it off because you want the extra days, or do you actually keep these hogs? And for me, one of the most important things was really making sure they knew that I valued my Judaism, because then on the Chag, I would keep it and you stay to it. And then when you get back, they ask you about it. And it's not like, I played video games, I had a good break. It's, no, I was in synagogue all day. My fast was very meaningful. You can actually tell them about the Chag.
You try to make it sound as miserable as possible, or you try to play it up?
I definitely probably try to play up the meaningfulness. Another thing I will say is, as I was grappling with it, I didn't always keep Chag. I didn't always keep Shabbat. It's something that I started doing over time. And when I first started doing it, I had already been working for a little bit. So my boss at the time, he was used to me working on Saturdays. And then I had to start telling him, well, now I'm not going to be working on Saturdays. And he understood. He was a very open-minded person. But then, if I'm honest, there were times that I would compromise. And I found that when I would work on Saturdays after I started keeping Shabbat, there would always be something that fell apart on that project, even though I thought, I was working on this project to save it, because if I don't get this done by Saturday night, the client's going to be upset. Well, for whatever reason, the client was still upset, or it didn't work out 3 months later. I had never seen a project where I broke Shabbat to fix it, where it ended up going smoothly. So what I learned from that was just be honest with yourself and your Judaism, and the rest will work out.
Well, I think we could just end the podcast right now because you've said all there is to say about the topic, Adin. John, let me ask you this question. You've had many employees over your career, and I'm sure some of them have been, taken off for Shabbos and Yontif holidays. Have you ever felt taken advantage of in that regard? Do you feel like people maybe just take advantage of it a little bit, even if they're not so observant? Or
I don't think so. I think a person who's of that mindset, if you have a good culture in your company, they won't fit in anyway. It's not going to be just showing up or taking off for convenience purposes, for Jewish purposes. If a person's dedicated, serious, and doing their work, we have flex time off in our workforce, which means basically it's a little bit open-minded in the sense that we let people take off anytime, whenever they want. There's no seniority. There's no 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. If someone needs to take off time, then take the time off. You need to go for a coffee with your grandma because it's an important time to be with her, then do it. Just make sure that your team is aligned with what you're doing. and make sure that you're pulling your weight. And in other ways, we've found that the opposite is true because we give so much trust to our team to do what they need to do. We find that people take off less time because of the flex time off. And so we have to actually show them how important it is to have a work-life balance, and that we sort of lead by example, encouraging people to do that. So no, I think if you have someone you think is taking advantage, then it's generally a problem in general with it'll manifest itself not even in their Jewish life.
I can't tell you one of the things that we deal with in the kollel. I've got employees in the kollel too, kollel rabbis, and I guess you could say this is part of a Jewish lifestyle, but they have lots of children, and very often their wives have children, they have children, and they've got to take off time for that. So somebody once asked me, do we have a paternity leave policy in the kollel where guys can take off? And I pointed out that oftentimes people in the community who work for corporate America and have paternity time, they actually spend a lot of their day in the kollel when they're on paternity time from their jobs. So it's we can give the kollel guys paternity leave, but they'll be in the kollel anyways. So what's the point? I want to broaden this out more than just calendar. Culturally, we're different. Culturally, we stick out as much as we try to hide it sometimes. Look, I'm not going to get anywhere by being somebody other than who I am, so I might as well be open about it, and let's see where that takes us, for better or for worse, and mostly for better, it sounds like. John, we're talking about conviction. We're talking about being who you are. You dress in the work like you dress in the kollel. You've got your yarmulke, you've got your black jacket. I know this is an audio-only podcast, but you look like a guy straight out of yeshiva, yet you're working in, the heights of corporate America. Can you talk about how your conviction has kind of shaped your journey in your role?
It's funny, when I was living in Houston, I was helping oversee an oil company that my family had invested in. I think a few weeks in, I dress very, I guess, black and white, quite literally. And so I think one of the lawyers came over to me.
Some of your jackets are kind of
very respectful. Yeah, it's got a little, it's changed a little over time. But he came over to me and asked me, he's like, "John, do you mind if I ask you a question?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. No, what's up?" He's like, why do you dress like a penguin every day?" So I appreciated the fact that he asked the question, because I'll never shy away from somebody who asks a legitimate question looking for a legitimate answer. It's funny because Adin and I just were talking yesterday about this, and I believe that the way you present yourself to the world is also a lot of how you think about yourself. And so an important part of my life was my experience in yeshiva when I was growing in my own personal journey. And there was a certain uniform that was part of that experience. And ever since I had that experience and it had such a profound impact on who I am as a person, I tried to maintain that persona, even though I've left, I'm not any longer in that experience. And so I dress the same way that I did when I was in my, in the deepest sense, in my own personal growth mode. And I try to keep that alive. I love when I'm in the kollel often in the mornings, which I study before I go to the office. So there's oftentimes people visiting the community, and when they'll come over to me, they'll say, "Oh, are you in the kollel?" Because I guess I look like I'm dressed like that. So I'll sometimes say I wish I was, but I told people that's the best compliment I can get. So yeah, that's important. So
what was the answer to the penguin question?
I think I may have just said Einstein didn't waste his time trying to figure out what he was wearing every day. So it definitely makes it easier.
So
I don't have to think about
your clothes.
I don't need to think about my wardrobe every day. As long as it's clean, I can put it on. I really don't think too much about what I'm wearing, which is great. But it's more than that. It's when I show up and I'm in meetings, I'm, oftentimes wearing my yarmulke. And I know that everyone in the room who doesn't know me is looking at me as a Jew. And I know there's different opinions on whether you should take your yarmulke off in a meeting or not. I think that if you are Jewish and you hold of your values, then people should see you interact, and you should hold yourself to that standard as well. And so, be careful what you say and how you talk. and people will adapt to you as well. I mean, I can't tell you how many times when people like, they'll say the F word or something in front of me and then forget that I'm in the room and then apologize. And I'm like, dude, I'm not like the cuss police or anything like that. And we don't have like a little jar in the room, but people know that I don't talk like that, and they'll never hear that from me. And so they'll adjust, and they'll, I don't know, maybe it elevates the room. I don't know. I don't push that on anyone. It's not something I try to do. It's just, it happens.
That's great. What's interesting to me is I'm kind of hearing both of these conversations, and there's a similar struggle that takes place kind of in the Orthodox world and also kind of in the more secular Jewish world, where in the secular Jewish world, it's how much do I want to be perceived as Jewish in the non-Jewish world? And in the Orthodox world is how much do I want to be perceived as a yeshiva guy, in the working world? And people in both places struggle with their identity and struggle with how they want to portray themselves, and they feel like they're not going to fit in. And what I'm hearing both of you say is the more you display your values, the more consistent you are with your values, the more people will respect you. Go for it, lean into it. Be as Jewish as you want to be. If that's in the secular world, stand out as a Jew in a world of people that aren't Jewish, or in the yeshiva community, in the Orthodox community, stand out as a yeshiva guy in a world of people who maybe, are more, in the working world. Be who you want to be, and the higher you can hold yourself to your standards, the more people will respect it. The flip side of that, obviously, is that people expect things out of you, and you can't. There's certain things that you can't do without blowing your cover, so to speak. Adin, are there any things that you find yourself not doing because you're trying to maintain a certain standard of being Jewish?
Interesting. Well, first, I think I would almost look at that the other way around, of the things I'm not doing that are on the Jewish side because I'm trying to maintain my standard of seeming secular, fitting into the rest of the world. And it's definitely, this is something I struggle with, and I talk to some of my good friends about it, because we want to wear a kippah or we want to wear a tzitzit, and we're scared to, because we feel so much pressure to, we can't go out to a bar wearing a kippah. That's not a good look. And then we're not going to be able to do this or do that. And I definitely find myself, especially when it comes to my Jewish appearance, probably making that a negotiable and compromising on that. Now, the other way around, the stuff that I find myself not being able to do in the work world, ever since I've been becoming more observant, I'll say one of them for sure is not working on holidays and Shabbat, like we mentioned. But then I think another is moral compromises. I didn't realize it in high school. I only did a semester of college, so didn't have much experience there. But a lot of people are making moral compromises every single day in the work world. Whether it's, slight plagiarism here. No one's really going to notice if I just had AI write this whole thing. Even to like fudging numbers and just lying to people why you didn't get it done. Oh, it's because this developer didn't get it on time. No, it's because I didn't project manage it correctly and wasn't on top of the schedule. And I think especially that side of Judaism has taught me that I shouldn't be trying to use Judaism and using my morals to justify why I chose my certain actions in business, but I should be choosing my actions based on my moral compass, which is why it's so important that we understand, and I understand personally, what it is that leads to our moral compass and what are the rules within Judaism.
Right. It's an important point that it's not just a culture. It comes with a set of morals and a set of values. John, what don't you do as a penguin in the work world?
What don't I do?
Like, what lines won't you cross?
Certain social events I won't attend, but it's already understood. The team will know sort of like where I would draw a line. Sometimes they'll sort of ask if something's appropriate or not. So that's one thing. What won't I do? I mean, what's interesting is that my team will actually now hold me to my own standards at times, which is something. I remember we have a certain halachic legal structure in place that helps us deal with the fact that the business is open and it's operating on the Shabbat. which is not a simple thing at all. And there are ways to deal with it in the optimum way. But I remember once when we were working at one of the pay structures, in order to do that, we hadn't calculated the number for a given year, and because it rolled over, the number ended up becoming much larger payout to some of the people involved. And I remember having a conversation with our GM at the time, and he said that, I said, we didn't really put the numbers out, so we should be able to adjust it for the year. And he just like looked at me in all seriousness, and he says, "But John, it's Shabbat. It's important." And I just I felt that right in my heart. And then I remember calling him afterwards and saying, I appreciate that you kept me to my own standards, and that we're going to honor whatever we put in place because it is Shabbat and it is important. So, hopefully if you're doing it right, it has a ricochet effect back on you.
Amazing. Okay. So we've talked kind of some of the technical aspects about, working in the world and dealing with different cultures and things like that. I want to kind of broaden this conversation even a little further than that, which is talk about success. What does success mean? How do we value success? And, obviously in the world today, you say the word success and the immediate connotation is money. How much wealth do you have? Why are you successful? I guess I'll illustrate this by sharing a conversation that I once heard that took place between one of the editors of the Haaretz newspaper in Israel and Rav Gershon Edelstein, who was like a venerated rabbi in Bnei Brak. And the two of them once sat down, and this is like the most secular left wing of Israel with like the most extreme right wing Haredi. And they're sitting down, and the Haaretz editor wanted to ask him the three questions that all secular Jews have for Haredi Jews. Okay? We're not going to cover all three of them today, but here are the three questions. Question number one: what do you think about us? What do Haredi Jews think about the Chiloni Jews in Israel? Question number two: why don't you serve in the army? We're definitely not going to cover that one today. That'll be a different episode. But question number three is, why don't you work? Why don't you work? So his answer to why don't we work, he said, first of all, we do work. And if you look at the statistics, the Haredi part of society does work in large part, and they pay taxes and all that. The reason why there's a perception that we don't work, he said, is because work isn't our highest priority. We prioritize other things ahead of work. And therefore, there's a perception that we don't care about work. And that manifests in many areas of life. It manifests in education. It manifests in schooling. Where are you going to go for school? Are you going to spend, how many years of your life are you going to spend trying to get to a place in a career where you're going to make money? Or are you going to spend those years trying to develop other parts of your life, things like that? So let's start this conversation at that point. What does success mean to your work environment? I'll start with Adin. What does success mean to kind of your world, the people around you? And is that right? Does it need a change?
Mm-hmm. This is definitely something that I think about every day, especially being so young and early in my professional world, of if I know what path I'm going to take, well, first I have to decide what I see as the end goal. So what do I decide is success? And I would say, not only from the conversations I have with peers my age, but also just from the data, a lot of people don't see having a family or having kids and supporting them as success. More and more people are purely after material success. These are the conversations that a lot of people that are my age, they have when they say, it's no longer, oh, I want to go into business because I'm passionate about, I'm looking at a water bottle right now, I'm passionate about cleaner water. Obviously, there is a large percent of people my age that care about that, but a lot of them are just saying, what business is going to make me the most money? How am I going to be the most successful? When they're saying success in that way, they're just referring to money. They want biggest house, biggest boat. They want a yacht. They want to live the life that Jeff Bezos has. They want to live the life that Elon Musk has, but that's just the life they see them have. I mean, even you look at Bezos and you look at Musk, the reason they started what they did wasn't because they were chasing wealth. They're chasing change, and that change was so profound that it gave them the material success. But then I would say in my much closer circle, probably among my 3-4 best friends, we're all on the same page that that's the material success is not what success is. We're concerned about the fact that people don't want to have children. We're concerned about the fact that people don't care about the nuclear family anymore. And for me, the success that I really want is to one day just be able to have a loving family that I can support. I see success as having enough wealth so that I can be an actual figure in my community that is able to support it, to donate to all the institutions that I love and that support me. And I don't think that's a shared opinion around a lot of people my age.
So, as follow up on that, how would you address it? I mean, is there a way to kind of talk to some of your peers and say, like, guys, hello, get with it? Like,
for sure. I think conversation is part of it, but I think another thing is they just have to see the results of their actions. So a lot of people are probably going to fall flat on their face chasing material wealth instead of passion or instead of change. And then a lot of people too, from what I've seen, they're working and they just feel empty inside, even if they're making money, even if they're successful by what they define as successful, they feel empty. And I've had conversations with friends who they don't even understand why they went down the path they did. And now they just feel that they're in an industry they hate. They're bored with their day to day and what's next. I mean, so many people my age don't even have hobbies anymore because they're just so focused on, oh, how can I get material success? If you don't have hobbies, you don't have passions, and all you're chasing is money, what are you?
wow. Adin, obviously you're talking about your demographic, Gen Z. John, you're dealing with, a different world, dealing with the world of, rubbing shoulders with CEOs and people who are already well established in their careers. Do you find a similar thing like Adin that in kind of your peer circle in the corporate sense, people are defining success by, material and financial success, or is it maybe different?
It's interesting. I have to think about that. But the people who I interact with on that, the people who are on that level, many of them are sort of what Adin was talking about. They're people who have passions, and then their success was sort of a corollary to that. You see them as, I know a lot of incredible Jewish philanthropists that are incredibly dedicated and passionate people. And the fact that they have their wealth has just enabled them to really do, immeasurable good because of it. And I've never looked at, the main reason I joined the family business was because I felt it's a vehicle for me to make a bigger impact as a person. And I knew that I would have more opportunities to do that. It's ironic, but I was once invited to speak at a large community event in Los Angeles once. And I don't know, it must have been a few hundred people in the room. And I really gave a very passionate talk about, I don't even know what it was about. And this lady walked over to me afterwards and she said, "Excuse me, are you a rabbi?" So I looked at her in the eyes and I said, "No, I'm a businessman." And then she looks at me, she's like, "Oh, wow, what a great speech it was." And what I realized is that for some reason, when you put the word rabbi in front of your name, then anything that comes out of your mouth is all of a sudden people are like weary. There's an agenda. They think that you have some sort of motive to, like secretly like convert them or something. I don't know what it is, but I literally will say the same thing, but because people will see me as more relatable within their world. And then all of a sudden it's like, wow, it's profound wisdom. But really it's just, sharing the same wisdom that I heard from my rabbis and my mentors. So to me, that realization is very important in terms of recognizing your circumstances in your life and then looking at those as tools to see how you can be the most impactful in your life. A good rule of thumb my rabbi once gave me about any major life decision that you ever need to make in your life, the criteria you should use is how can I be the most impactful person in my life to the people around me. That was the first guiding principle. And then everything else should fall afterwards. Now, sometimes people misunderstand what that means. It means if the most important thing and the people you're going to impact, and your capabilities are to impact your immediate family and be the best husband and the best father to your children, then that's what it means to make the biggest impact, and that should be your focus. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, of course. That was great. These words, success, another word that I love people use is the word investment. So people like the word investment, it's like, okay, putting money away to save for retirement, right? My parents have been in the coal world their whole lives, and, one might look at that and say, well, they haven't really invested much in their retirement. There's another way to look at that. My parents have long said, half joking, but the older they get, the more serious it becomes. Less of a joke it is that their retirement plan, they have 11 kids. Their retirement plan is 1 month by each kid and then 1 month by themselves. They're investing, not in a stock portfolio, not in a 401k, but in human capital, as it were. And that'll pay dividends in ways that we can't, way beyond dividends of money in a banking account. I want to talk about success a little bit more and where success comes from. I have an opinion that I'll express, because I'm also allowed to have opinions here, that I think is so antithetical to what the business world preaches. There is an entire industry of business books, of business school, of people. You can go to any bookstore, library, online. Here's how to become wealthy. Okay, here's how to become successful. And typically what these books do is they'll take a successful guy and they'll say, okay, tell me your story. And he'll go back and tell the story. And the implication is if you just do X, Y, and Z, you will become successful. And I frankly think it's a bunch of hogwash. They don't take the guys that are unsuccessful that did X, Y, and Z and didn't become successful. They're taking the people that were successful and starting with the target and working their way backwards. So I want to ask an honest question here. How much of the success, and I guess we'll start with John on this one, how much of the success that happens, financial success that happens in the world, is based on decisions that people made, good decisions that they made, actions they took, and how much of that is based on factors that are beyond their control? Luck, being in the right place at the right time, maybe divine intervention.
I haven't done any studies on other businesses, but what I can tell you from my own limited experience within a family business that's, has had a lot of turns and ups and downs. It's hard to believe that the decisions that we made were always the ones that drove to the outcomes that we wanted. The one thing that I do see as consistent, I see this from my father, is incredible determination and the ability to fail many, many times and not to be broken by that. I can see those two things as very consistent within it. And then also deep faith. Faith is very, very important. When things get difficult and you have nowhere else to turn, and then you realize that there's a hand of God who's guiding this process, that sort of release is not only just comforting on a personal and physiological level, but then you start seeing how when you step out after you've done everything you feel you should, that it plays out in a beautiful way, and the outcomes are never what you would have intended. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've had things that just completely came from left field that would have never been a dream if we wouldn't have held strong to a certain value or standard that we keep as a family. So
let me ask you a blunt question. Is there any value in business books?
I can tell you yes. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I went to Harvard Business School for executive education, not because I'm smart enough, but because I paid for it. What I learned from there is I've read a lot on business, and what I realized is that there's a lot of great and important ideas that are important for business success. There's no denying that. There's a lot of great ideas. In my mind, the question was, but what's the most important? And what I learned from that experience, which was a little bit surprising, was how important culture is. And that it was something that you had, in this room, my cohort was 150, very high caliber entrepreneurs, CEOs, and all of them thinking like, yeah, I don't need this fluffy stuff. But then you have like the most incredible educators that are teaching you how important it is to understand that. Again, and there's a science to culture too. It's not just kumbaya all day. But that really helped me understand what culture is in the business that we have, and I think thankfully we've integrated a lot of that into it. So, and what is culture? Culture is values, and culture is understanding where you draw the line on things. One of our core values is doing the right thing, and if we don't live up to those standards, then the people we have are gonna see right through it. A lot of examples of this, but if you don't have strong values, then you have no guide rails to what defines success. Success has no definition otherwise. So
if I'm just kind of summarize what you're saying here is that the advice that you'll find out there that speaks to values, principles, great stuff, all the other technical stuff, do this, do that, whatever. Is that a safe?
You can't be an idiot. You have to have structure. You have to be responsible. But more than anything else, if you have strong values and you have a vision for what, at Mall of America, it took us a long time to figure this out, a couple of years. But our mission, which is like what makes us important, is we want everyone to leave the experience that they have with our brand as with the expression that I loved it. And that means that we're beyond selling stuff. We're beyond getting people to pay rent. We're in the world of people having that experience when they say, wow, I just loved being there with my family. I loved being able to find those things that help me express who I am.
Could you say that story with the grandma? I love that one.
I don't know if I could say that publicly. I guess I could.
I just put you on the spot, so.
I think it was holiday season, and I was walking through the mall with one of the leasing agents, and there was an old lady who was just having a difficult time walking. You'd see she was really frustrated, and I just walked over to her and I said, can I help you? I don't, she doesn't know who I am. I don't know who she is. And she looks at me and she has this sort of sad face, and she says she's looking for a certain ornament that goes on a Christmas tree, and it's like a buffalo, the shape of a buffalo. And so, and she's like, I know that there's an ornament store here, and I've been walking around in circles. I can't find it anywhere. So, I said, what, I don't know how we got to it, but she's like, it's, I said, why is it important to you? She says her husband had just passed away and he loved buffaloes, and she wanted to buy like a few of them to give out to her children to put on in their holiday, their Christmas trees. So I made a few phone calls to customer service. I had them, call some of the stores and find out. And, within a few minutes, it was clear that we didn't have the buffalo ornament. And so at that point, I pulled out my phone and the leasing agent was looking at me, and I opened up Amazon.com and I searched for a buffalo Christmas tree ornament. And then I showed it to this lady. I'm like, is that what you're looking for? Her eyes like lit up, and I'm like, what's your address? And then I just, I bought it for her, and I sent it to her at her house. And I can't, I can tell the leasing agent was like, oh my God, you're taking away sales from the mall. Which is ridiculous, obviously. But she was so moved by that she ended up writing me this beautiful letter. And then she gave me her grandmother's hand knitted pot things. What do you put your pot on? Whatever. What?
Trivet.
Is that? I don't even know what they're called. We still have them at home. Just such beautiful things, and she'd never used them, and she just like felt that what I did for her was so meaningful. I don't know how that's relevant, but
So, Adin, I would turn this topic to you a little bit. Where does Gen Z go for business advice? And does John's story change your attitude a little bit?
Huh. The story about the grandma you're saying?
Yeah, and the whole idea of, sticking with values. And
I mean, I think a lot of my generation obviously still goes to college, but then another large part is we go to YouTube for business advice. I mean, there's millions of gurus per se, but then there's an agreed upon couple dozen that if you watch any of them, you're going to get very solid business advice, because these are CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs who have actually created 9-figure, 10-figure, 11-figure companies, exited them or whatever, and they can talk about the experience, the culture they built there, the hardships they faced, how many times they fell, and everything that John said there, I've definitely seen said by these people as well, where, I mean, even I'll take Jeff Bezos, because I love listening to his business advice. It's always customer first. That's why he built Amazon the way he did. And I mean, I think that's completely reflected in that story about the grandma that John met, because the customer first approach means if you don't have the solution for the customer, as long as you can help find the solution for them, well, then hopefully you found yourself a customer for life. And maybe you're not going to get the immediate payout, but long term, if someone actually has positive brand identity with you, if they feel that they're loyal to you, well, over time, it will hopefully pay out even larger. Okay,
well, this has been an awesome conversation. Just want to kind of wrap up over here. We've been talking about Jews and work. Just kind of final thoughts. If there's one message, Adin, that you wanted to share with your Jewish peers about, integrating their work life into their Judaism, what would it be? Here's your opportunity.
But integrating their work life into their Judaism, or integrating their Judaism into their work life?
You said it better than me.
Well, I think the main thing I would say is a lot of my friends and just a lot of Jews I've seen my age, they love that they're Jewish. So be proud of that in the workspace. Even if it's just sharing something as simple as why we do Hanukkah around Christmas with your Christian employees. And I've found a lot of companionship in doing so, where a lot of non-Jews are very curious, and you could be the first Jew they met. So be proud of your Judaism in your workplace, never compromise on it, and be happy to share.
Awesome. John, final message to all those thousands of people listening?
Thousands. Oh, I just got nervous.
Hopefully thousands.
A lot to say, but I'll share something that I had asked one of my mentor rabbis before I entered the workforce. I sort of wanted to know where do you draw the line in terms of how much effort you're supposed to be putting into your career? And it's an important question, because, we're responsible for doing and putting an effort in, but there's a point where you have to draw a line and realize that God is ultimately part of the equation as well. And he told me an interesting thing, which I've used. I haven't been perfect with it, but he said that if you ever get to a point where your career is infringing on your higher values of being a husband, of being a father, of doing the important things in your life, if you find you're compromising on all of those because you need to get to the office, because you need to make another sale, because of some other external pressure, he says, then you've gone too far. And, the analogy that is used is that if you want God to drive the car, then you just be a passenger in the car and you help navigate. But the second you think you're completely in control, then God will say, oh, you think you're in control? Here are the keys. You can now be in control. And then the circumstances change. And I don't know about you, but I'd much rather have God in the driver's seat than me be there. And so I just tell people, really don't compromise and don't sacrifice what it means to be a Jew because of your career. It will only aid you to be grounded and have strong fundamental values to take that with you in your life.
Amazing. Thank you both. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you for having.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Two Jews, One Opinion, where we explore the heart of what unites us as one people. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Stay connected, stay curious, and remember, No matter how many opinions we have, we're all part of the same story. Until next time,